Fisher in the Alamac Manta just cannot shake off his great rival, and his lead could evaporate with a simple puncture. With this kind of pressure from behind, Bertie is really trying. The Sydney Meek prepared car has run faultlessly, and with Fisher's bogey stage Fanet now finally behind him, his first Donegal victory is looking more possible by the mile.
Welcome along to Krunching Gears. Season 2, Episode 1, Part 2. This is the second part of our tribute to Bertie Fisher, and we have many more exciting guests to speak to along the way. In this episode, we'll speak to 4, and we're going to start off with Nigel Frazer. Nigel is the son of Austin Frazer, who co-drove for Bertie from the mid-70s right up through to the late 80s. It's a fascinating story. I started off asking Nigel about his dad's career previous to sitting with Bertie. They sat with the one and only Cathal Curley.
Yeah, he had a very successful partnership with Cathal, particularly sort of early to the mid-70s. Cathal won Donegal 3 times in a row, obviously with my father not alongside him, because he had organising duties with Donegal in those days. But aside from that, obviously they won the Circuit of Ireland in 74. They won the Ulster, they won the Manx in there. So yeah, it was a hugely successful partnership.
Yeah. And you just alluded there to your dad organising Donegal. Like one of the founding fathers, I suppose, of the Donegal International Rally too. Your father, wasn't he? So
yeah, even though he was from Enniskillen, I think Donegal contacted him whenever they had aspirations to make the Rally International and see if they could gain something from his experience. So he went up there, and they put together a really good team. I think they had a real good bond. I mean, that was our very early 70s, and even to this day, the people that he worked with to put that rally on are still family friends and still in close contact. So it seemed to be a very successful team, and I think they all put an awful lot of effort into getting Donegal on the map in terms of international rallying, and it's gone from strength to strength since.
And when you consider by 74, they become wasn't it the Ford Sportsman of the Month award? It had never been achieved before by an organizer of a rally ever before at that stage. Not right?
Yeah, funny. I can remember he got awarded like a marble cigarette box. My father never touched a cigarette in his life. This ornate cigarette box sat in our living room for many a year after that. But yeah, he was the first organizer to be awarded that, which was obviously a big honor for him and for the whole team that put that together. I mean,
so Cathal then retired late 76, and then your dad went on to win Donegal actually in 77. Was another legend of the sport, Billy Coleman.
Yeah, I think my father always had a desire to do a rally with Billy. I think that was always something that at that time that he was looking to do, and obviously the opportunity came along, and it was his first year. He had been clerk of the course the previous year, so it was the first year really he'd competed on Donegal as an international, and however that came about, he got the opportunity to sit in with Billy in the Stratus, and yeah, he went straight from organizer to winner. So it was a smooth, seamless transition.
Yes.
Yeah, Kevin, it would be great if my father was able to come on here and tell these stories himself. Unfortunately, his health isn't good and hasn't been good now for a while. He's not really in a position to come on and recall all the stories and the tales he has to tell. So look, I'll come on and I'll do my best to try and fill in the gaps and remember what I can from those days.
Okay, Nigel. I'll pass on our kind regards to him. So, can you tell us how the combination of your dad and Bertie materialised?
Yeah, obviously Cahill retired in 76, and my father, I suppose he drifted about between drivers for a bit. I know he navigated with Roy Cathcart for an event or two, and obviously with did that event with Billy as well in 77. And then I think him and Bertie were at an event somewhere, and after the event was over, they just got chatting at the prize giving, and Bertie came up to him and he said to him, "What about us two Fermanagh boys get together?" And obviously my father thought that wasn't a bad idea. And that was how it all started, and they went from there. I think Cork 20 was their first rally together, and they ended up second overall. And then they went to the national rally in Donegal at the tail end of that year, and they won it. So it was a successful start.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, it was a good a start as you would get, isn't it? Then
Yeah.
So we're bound forward in a few years. The 82 Ulster, like, was the big breakthrough for Bertie, I suppose. Like, won his first tarmac championship round. It was also like the British Cruise was over that year too.
Yeah, it was. I think that there was a lot of talk around that time about pace notes, and pace notes generally weren't commonplace in Irish rallying at all, and it was something that I know Bertie and my father were very keen to get introduced. And I don't know if Bertie maybe even had thoughts of it's not worth the effort anymore, because he felt like he was putting in the effort, and there were people beating him on the stages that maybe had been out and had been doing some wrecking. So the Ulster that year, that was the first time they had introduced pace notes, and it was, I think, one of the main reasons that they were really keen to do well. I think Per Ekland would have been Bertie's main challenger in 82, but he had a pretty commanding performance, I think, on that event. He led more or less from start to finish.
I know, listening or watched the coverage recently, like, Bertie made a big thing of was they put a lot of effort into the night stages on the recce, and they put down a lot of their one down to that they were more confident at night because they had good notes. Yeah,
I think they had actually, he had attributed his notes partly. A couple of years previously, him and my father had gone to Belgium, and they did the Haspengouw rally out in Belgium, and it was pace notes, and they really got on to pace notes then, but they found when they did the recce, they made their notes, and then when they went back to check them, they thought these notes are far too fast, and they slowed them down. And then when they actually got onto the event, they were right the first time. They should have left them as they were, and they'd slowed the notes too far. And I think that was a real good lesson for them when it came to the Ulster, because the Ulster, even though it was a couple of years later, that was the next event, pace note event that they did. And they had that knowledge and that background, which maybe gave them an edge over the guys that were competing against that hadn't used pace notes at all. And then, but yeah, they focused on the night stages to the extent that they didn't even finish the recce. They got to the last few stages of the rally, and they had no notes, which seems absolutely insane in today's world, that somebody who was leading an international rally wouldn't have found the time to go over the last few stages. But I don't know what the reason was, whether there was they just ran out of time, or knowing Bertie, maybe there was some big business deal that needed to be
something else had to be done.
He had to head off and sort out something else. But but thankfully they had enough of a lead at that stage that they were able to coast through without too much problems.
And like those early years, you think like the fantastic cars, like the BDA escorts, the Skona, the Manta, like, is there any special memories that stand out for you in those early years?
I have a vague recollection of the Ulster and the Red Escort in 82. I would have been 8, 9. But I suppose my main memories would have been the early days of the Mantas. 84 especially. They had the gold card, Shell gold card Manta, which probably to this day is probably my favourite car of all the Mantas that Bertie would have had. I do remember in 84, was the first year that the Circuit of Ireland had gone to, it was always in Killarney, and this time it was Waterford. They had switched to Waterford, and I had never been allowed to go round, follow the rally around as a young kid. And this was the first year, finally, permission was given, and we all decided we would go as a family. And it couldn't have gone better that day. They were leading the event. I think that was the year Henry Toivonen was in the Porsche.
Oh yes.
And he had hit problems, and he was surging back through the field at the time, but Bertie was leading. And it, in those days, obviously, having a Northern Ireland driver win the circuit was a long time. In fact, the last time it happened was 74 with Cahill and my father. It was 10 years later, and I was 84, and no Northern Ireland driver had ever won it since. And they were leading coming down into Waterford, and I recall being in the car and Gladys Fisher and my mother and Mark Fisher and myself in the back seat. And as we were coming into Waterford, it was the last stage before the overnight halt in Waterford. And as we drove into Waterford, we met Bertie's chase car coming out the road as if they were heading back to the last stage. And we waved at them, and they gave us a thumbs down as they went past in the car. In days of no social media or mobile phones, that was as good as the communication got, which obviously wasn't a good sign. And it turned out they'd retired then on the last stage of that day. But I think it was sort of a glimpse of what was to come in the Manta years, that he was able to take that lead, and they, he built on that as the years went on.
Yeah, I think whatever, Bertie always bounced back, didn't they? If he had a bad result the next event, he come back and was probably come back stronger every time. It seemed to be part of his build up too, wasn't it?
Yeah, I think that was part of his character. It made him more determined. He was very determined that he was going to achieve what he wanted to achieve, not just in rallying, but in life and in business and everything else. I know obviously business was a big thing. Recce's always used to be disrupted, apparently, with if there was a business deal to be done or somebody had to be seen, they might go and recce a couple of stages, and then Bertie would say to my father, right, we're just going to take a wee break here for an hour, I have to go and see so and so. And then head off, and Bertie do a bit of business, and then he'd come back and finish off another couple of stages. So yeah, it was always a juggling match, trying to balance everything that was going on. Busy man.
And you're just alluded to there, Mark Fisher too, he would have been a part of your childhood as well, growing up. I'm sure there was many an event yourself and Mark and was palling about there too.
Yeah, very much so. We would obviously, with the two families being so closely linked, we would have spectated together at a lot of rallies, and obviously with Sydney running the car, Chris and Barry Meek would have been knocking around as well at times. I remember one year, Donegal one year, I'm not sure, maybe 84, 85, something like that. It was Donegal, and Bertie would always have stayed in Jackson's Hotel in Ballybuffet. And we were there, myself and Mark and Barry and Chris. And for some reason, Dave Richards from Pro Drive was over that year, and he was staying in the hotel as well. And there was a service area up by Downings, just at the foot of Atlantic Drive, I think, from him. And we got word, Dave Richards is going to take you up to service this morning. You go up with Dave. So the four lads, we would have been 10, 12, something like that. And Barry and Chris probably a wee bit younger, maybe. But what we hadn't banked on, that Dave Richards wasn't driving to Rossapana, he was taking the helicopter. So we all piled into the car and into the helicopter and flew up to Downings and landed in the service area. And I can remember somebody telling me then they saw this helicopter land, and it was in the days when there wasn't that too many around until the importance arriving here. Who's going to get out of this? And the door opened, and these four kids just jumped out, started fighting on the grass underneath the helicopter.
They thought it was some kind of pop star or something that landed.
They were sadly disappointed.
Another very important part of that relationship too was the GM dealer team, along with Russell Brooks and Jimmy McRae too. Bertie and Austin was a a big part of that as well, weren't they?
Yeah, I suppose 84 really was when that took off in the gold card car. They were involved then in the British Championship as well as a lot of the Irish tarmac events. Bertie's speciality would have been tarmac, but there was the likes of the Welsh and the Scottish rally that year. So it was, I suppose, largely a new experience. But I mean, he acquitted himself very well. He was, as I say, he was leading the circuit at the time, and I think he finished maybe 4th in the Ulster that year. And the very good run on the Manx. I think it was 2nd in the Manx that year. And the Manx was always a favourite spot of Bertie's right throughout his career. But then they went on, obviously, to the RAC that year.
That's right, yeah.
And they had a great run in the RAC. 9th, I think.
9th, I think, yeah, just about to say 9th, yeah.
Yeah,
definitely, yeah.
And when you read the names that were in front of them, there was, the likes of, I think Ari Vatanen won it that year, and Hannu Mikkola and Michelle Mouton and Brooks and McRae, and it was a star-studded field in front of him.
Yes. And some strong names behind them, so like they were there in merit as well as everything else too, weren't they?
Absolutely. And I can remember, obviously Bertie didn't have massive experience on the loose in comparison to what he had on tar, but I do remember my father saying at the time, as that event went on, he really got to grips with rallying on the loose. And he would have said, from the first stage to the last stage, there was a massive difference in how Bertie was able to deal with the conditions.
Yes.
And that was something that he took into the following season, I think. He continued that the British Championship then the year after, and he had some great results. I think the Scottish in 85, they ended up 4th, which was a real good. And I think the Welsh as well that year. I think they were actually very, I'll say, fortunate. They had a big accident in the Welsh that year, but I think they had beaten McRae on 1 or 2 stages. They had a few problems as well. They dropped mechanical time. And then I think they went off down a bank, and they came to rest against the tree stump, and if the tree stump hadn't stopped them, it was a long way down.
Those Welsh stallions.
Yeah. But it showed his speed and showed him what he'd learnt really at the RAC the year before.
Yeah, and the 5 days in the car had obviously paid dividends, and getting the seat time is what it always is about, isn't it? So.
Yeah, it is. My father always attributed that RAC to Bertie's development on the loose surface.
And like 85, the Manx, like that's one of those events that always stands out in the memories, isn't it too?
Yeah, it is. I mean, as I say, the Manx was always a massive. Bertie was always a massive favourite over in the Isle of Man among the spectators, and seemed to be hugely popular. He had a great run in 1982 after he won the Ulster that year. I think he was 2nd that year as well, and I think that sort of started his love affair with the Manx. Funny, I was looking through some bulletins from the Manx. There's a few scrapbooks knocking around, and even on the 83 event then, Bertie was lying 3rd after 20 or 30 stages, but first was Henry Toivonen, 2nd was Ari Vatanen, 3rd was Bertie Fisher, and 4th was Stig Blomqvist.
Oh wow.
and 5th was Russell Brooks.
Yes.
So it was a place that he excelled in.
Yes.
A lot, but I just happened to come across one of the quotes. It was one of Patterson's news bulletins, but they crashed out on stage 35.
Right.
A crazy amount of stages.
Yes.
Nowadays. But there was a quote in one of the bulletins, and it was from an English enthusiast, so not a local. He said, "Well, when I heard the news that Fisher was out, I cried. It sounds a bit soft, but I don't mind if you print it. That's how we all feel." I thought, so it just shows you how popular he was. But yeah, 85 then, there was a lot of rivalry 85 because the Quattros were starting to establish themselves as the car to have, and the Mantas were probably nearing their end, and Brooks and McRae and Bertie obviously in that one team. But in the Manx that year, the Audis, like Malcolm Wilson, Michelle Mouton, someone else, Blomqvist, I think maybe.
They sent over a big team anyway, didn't they?
Yeah,
That year?
there was, and there was definitely a lot of rivalry, and the Audis all disappeared, whether it was mechanical or accidents, and the Mantas came through, and Bertie finished up third, the 1, 2, 3 with the Mantas, which was massive for GM Dealer Sport at the time. And just before the prize giving, my father and Bertie were in the room. They must have been sharing a room, and Bertie went for a shower before the prize giving. And my father could hear Bertie singing in the shower. What's going on there? So Bertie comes out and he says, I've put together a song I'm going to perform at the prize giving. And my father says, what? You're going to do what? And yeah, he says, I've got this song, and it went something along the lines of, I'm not going to sing because I can't sing, but the lyrics were something along the lines of, where have all the Audis gone? Crashed and broken, all but one. When will they ever learn? Something along those lines. And my father says, you can't sing that at the prize giving. What are Audi going to think? What if Audi want to approach you about a seat for some stage in the future? They're never going to speak to you again. This could spell the end of any deals that you'll get done in the future. Bertie says, no, I think it's good, I think I might do it. So Bertie got up on the stage, and I think at that point my father still wasn't sure, was he actually going to go through with this crazy idea? But he did. He got up on the stage and he took the mic and sung the song, and it went down. Well, it went down great among the crowd. I think he got a standing ovation. I'm not sure how it went down without it, and he never did get an offer to drive for them.
No. Maybe there was a big red line through across his name then.
Maybe. But I think everybody outside the Audi camp thought it was hilarious.
Yes.
Great entertainment.
So, going forward into 86, things sort of took a bit of a dramatic turn. A Galway in 86, the brakes failed. Like, did your dad ever mention that?
Yeah, I recall that being a big thing at the time. And something that I think it probably affected Bertie more than it affected my father at the time. Certainly they were very lucky. They came down a very fast straight. I'm sure most people have seen it on YouTube. It's got so many views. But yeah, they came down a very fast straight, and when he stood on the brakes failed. And they went straight on. And there was a lady with 2 children standing hand in hand with 2 young children in the middle of the escape road. And Bertie managed to find, thankfully they froze, didn't move, and Bertie managed to find a gap down the side and also down the side of the marshal's car.
Yeah.
It's remarkable that there was absolutely no contact with anything. When you think of a marshal's car blocking off an escape road, it's not too often there's room.
And you can get past it.
Get past it. So it was incredibly lucky where that did happen. But certainly Bertie had experiences previously. He had been involved in a fatal accident, bushwhacker, I think it was, a spectator, and it was something I think that had always been in his mind, and the safety aspect. And I think whenever this happened, it really, I think it made it difficult for Bertie to commit 100% when he was driving, or he felt that it would. And when you're at that level, if you're backing off for corners because there's a crowd in the escape road, you're not going to be competitive.
No.
And Bertie would never have done things by half.
No.
If he wasn't going to be in it at 100%, he wasn't going to be in it at all, I think.
That's for sure.
But they had the RPM had the in-car camera in the car for that event, obviously. And after it had happened, Bertie and my father had a long discussion about whether they would actually release the video and give it back to Plum. So they took the video out of the camera,
right,
and didn't initially give it to RPM. I think they were they didn't want to sensationalise anything,
Okay.
and they were in two minds as to whether it would be beneficial to have it go out on TV. But I think after they discussed it, then they decided, you know, it would serve as a lesson to
Yes,
people that are watching, and it very much did so. I think
I think so. Yeah.
history will tell.
Mm-hmm.
So they gave it to Plum and gave their okay then to use the footage, and
Mm-hmm.
it really did, because when you look at rallying in those days, even in the World Championship, you see, you can picture the images of Portugal or somewhere like that, where you're
Uh-huh.
driving down walls of people on either side. How the
And
drivers,
touching the cars was going past,
um,
kind of thing, you know. Yeah. So
how there wasn't more
yeah.
serious accidents even
Mm-hmm.
outside of Ireland, the world over. It
That's for
was
sure.
incredible. So
That's for sure.
yeah, so you know, Bertie decided obviously then that he couldn't commit to it, but
Mm-hmm.
I think the bug obviously doesn't go away,
No,
as
but
rally men know, the bug
yeah.
doesn't go away. So
Mm-hmm.
um, I think he decided himself that if they could sort out the safety side of it, that
Mm-hmm.
would be his reason to get back in. So then they went in, they did safety officer on Donegal rally, and the two of them ran as
Mm-hmm.
course car um, through the stages before the events, and took sort of a very high profile role, I suppose,
Yes.
in promoting safety. And
Because
you know,
that was the year, was the insurance no too. Like, it was Matt Doherty took the bull by the horns, and like your dad and Bertie was kind of forefront in that campaign, weren't they? That bringing
yeah,
safety to the stages and all this kind
yeah.
of thing.
I mean, it was a massive issue at the time. You know, the future of rallying in
Yeah,
Ireland
that's for
was at
sure.
stake.
Mm-hmm.
So it did need somebody or something to sort it out. And
Took strong
I think
leadership, didn't it? You know.
yeah,
So.
it did, and I think Bertie took that leading role
Mm-hmm.
in that, and delivered changes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, without a doubt. Yeah. Yeah. So then, as you say, the bug then doesn't leave. So by mid '87, the bug was back with a vengeance.
Yeah. He came back. He came back from the Manx National. Funny, I
Mm-hmm.
remember. Um, I was always so into spectating, and was desperate for them to get back into
Uh-huh.
action again. And a few days before the Manx National, then I got up for school as normal one day, and my father says, "Oh, you're not going to school today?" And I said, "What?" Because I was never allowed a day off school. That did not happen. And I said, "Why not?" He says, "Oh, you're coming with us to the Isle of Man. We're going over to watch the Manx National." So the next thing I know, we're in the car heading into St Angelo Airport in Enniskillen, and Mark Fisher and I in this little six-seater plane, Bertie and my father and a pilot to take us to the Isle of Man, and we all flew over and watched the event in the Isle of Man, '87, and obviously they won that,
Mm-hmm.
and then came back to Donegal and won Donegal. So he
Mm-hmm.
really came back with a bang.
Yeah.
Um, and the Ulster then was the next event up, and they were right in contention right
Oh yeah.
until the end there.
Mm-hmm.
Mark Lovell in the Sierra was battling with them, and the two of them were ahead of Russell Brooks. And
Yeah.
I can
Well ahead.
remember, yeah, I can remember my father saying at the time, Russell's surprised that we're beating him. I remember him saying to Bertie.
Yes.
I think it definitely took Brooks by surprise, because he
Mm-hmm.
always would have had the edge, you know,
Yes.
in a lot of their previous meetings
Mm-hmm.
earlier in the '80s. So I think that was probably, in terms of the Manta days, as well as maybe as Bertie has ever driven
Yeah.
that little spell. And
Mm-hmm.
there was I remember a service area in Fisher Engineering in Ballinamallard,
Mm-hmm.
and it was just before the last loop of stages, I think, or a couple of loops to go maybe before they got back to Belfast, and there was only seconds between the two at the
Mm-hmm.
front of the field. But I think Bertie knew the game was up, because those stages were particularly fast,
Yes.
and he knew that from the recce that it was going to suit the Cosworth more than the Manta.
Uh-huh.
And I think they actually maybe even made the decision, you know, they weren't going to push, they weren't going to have a real charge, because if Lovell had a good clean run and kept his pace going, they weren't going to be
Take the
able to match
time.
him.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So they sort of settled for second at that stage.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, that was certainly one of my father would have put that down to one of Bertie's best performances.
Yeah. I don't remember, was it Donegal or the Ulster? Was it probably Plum Tyndall was interviewing Bertie at the end, and he says, like this, you're come back so much stronger or something. And Bertie saying, I probably should retire more often or something, So.
Yeah. I think he'd probably been stewing on it for all those
Yes.
for all those months, getting himself psyched up, and yeah, he came back with a bang for sure.
That's for sure. And so your dad then continued into the Sierra then, and your dad considered retiring. Then was it the end of '88? Your dad considered retiring, was it?
Yeah, just with I suppose he'd just been doing it so long. The work and the effort and the time was outweighing the enjoyment maybe. And I think '88 particularly wasn't a good year. Bertie switched to the Sierra and never really got on with the car. Had a lot of problems that year, and there wasn't much cheer about at the end of that year. In fact, I think possibly Bertie's shortest rally ever came that year. They did Lurgan Park. They hired a 6R4, I think maybe from John Price. A yellow 6R4 in Lurgan Park, and didn't get around the first corner.
That's right.
It started in around the back of the service area, and it was like a long left-hander before you come out onto the tarmac to head up back towards the entrance to the park.
Yes.
And on that first long left-hander, whether it was a new car or whatever it was, they slid wide and hit a tree, and that was rally over. They got about 100 yards. I think that summed up the '88 season for them. But yeah, at the end of that year, then my father was considering packing it in, and as I said, I loved being around the rally scene, and I was pleading with him to keep going, give it another year. So eventually, I remember coming down into the kitchen one day, and my father was getting measured up for a rally suit in the kitchen. I thought, oh, he must be going for another year. Not so bad. Yeah, I went back for the 1 year in '89, in the BM, which was, I always loved that BM. Was a spectacular car to watch.
Yeah, the sound and everything about that car, there was just something very special about it then,
Yeah,
so.
it was. But then he eventually packed the end of '89. Then was my father's last year, the Killarney that season. Was his last event. So Killarney actually was at that stage was the only international rally in the championship that my father had never won.
Okay.
So I think he was hoping for a fairy tale ending. He could win the one round.
Got away as such,
Yeah, but it didn't happen. I think there was some a sensor, sort of a 50p's worth of a sensor, gave up at some point, and that was this. The plug on it, so that was the end of their partnership. I think he actually went back. He went back and did. I think it was a Cavan
the Legacy or something.
Yeah, just I think Rory wasn't available or something, and father briefly came out and sat in the Subaru for a while. But that was the end of it.
So looking back then, what's your personal memories of Bertie Fisher? I suppose the rally driver and the man.
He was always very welcoming, I suppose, and friendly and accommodating, and I suppose he always had time for you.
Okay.
Even though I was so closely involved with Bertie and with the whole scene, I still really looked up to him as a bit of a superstar.
Yes.
But that certainly was never the way he acted. He was always, he'd always have a word for anybody, and just a real nice guy. And in terms of his rallying ability, he was second to none.
Yeah,
he was right up there with the best of the best. And it would have been interesting to see if he had made the leap outside of Ireland, outside of Britain, where that could have taken him. But nobody seemed to have a bad word to say about him.
No, absolutely. This is the idea behind this podcast is everybody that spoke previous about it had nothing only glowing things to say. James Cullen, Bertie giving them tires to compete against him. Vincent Bonner saying that they never seen Vincent hit the car after he bought it off Bertie. They come and looked at the car and they said it would go halfers and the fixing of the car, things like that. There, it's it's just the mark of a man that's, you know, at a different level, isn't it? You know, just such a genuinely good guy.
It is, because you wouldn't be surprised that there would be a bit of tension or friction. You know, you're competing high pressure environment, swapping seconds, and not everybody always gets on, but that didn't seem to be ever be the case with Bertie. It was always and very fair and very sporting. I touched on earlier about the pace notes, and like the concept of going and doing a recce when you weren't supposed to wouldn't even have entered his head.
No.
You know, he wanted to win, obviously. But he wanted to win in the right way.
Do it fairly. There was no ambiguity.
No,
because like even Austin McHale spoke with him, and he said like that's the one thing with Bertie. Like whenever the clock was ticking, every second counted. But when it come to the end, you stepped out, you shook hands, and you know you went and had your pint or whatever, you know, and you know there was no bad feeling or ill feeling left then because you knew it was a fair fight, you know. So
yeah, absolutely. No, I think it was very important in rallying and business and in life. Every element for Bertie, that's the way it was. It was just he was just a good guy to be around.
Well, Nigel, that's a nice point to finish it up there, isn't it? So thank you for taking the time for joining us.
No problem at all. It's a pleasure. Thank you.
Rally heads north for its final high-speed phase over the Antrim Plateau. Bertie Fisher, who ran out of practice time up here, is firmly in control. The red escort still immaculate.
Our accident took 20 seconds of us on the last stage, which we thought was about right for driving it blind, you know. But we still have 2 minutes and 5 seconds lead, so, you know, we're still happy enough with 7 miles, 8 miles of stages to do. I think we can probably soldier through if we don't have any problems.
For Bertie Fisher, who has long felt that Irish rallying needed legal pace notes to broaden its appeal and cut down local advantages, this is a fine reward for a perfect drive. And the Lord Mayor seems happy to share in his success.
Head for Letterkenny, knowing that Bertie Fisher has secured his first win in Donegal at last. And by the time they arrive at the finish ramp, there's a huge crowd there to greet him. And every one of the fans appreciated another stunning performance from the man who retired from the sport last year. But this elusive first Donegal win was a long time coming.
I've been coming here since I think about 72 or 73. And I've probably had more accidents in Donegal than anyone else ever had either. But no, it's been a fantastic weekend. We've led the rally from the very first stage, and we've never lost the lead, and we haven't had a problem with the car.
You're starting to make a habit of this, leading rallies right from the start. That's 2 outings, 2 wins. I mean, what's the secret of this new success?
I don't know. I think I don't retire often enough, probably.
We now speak to Mr. Tough Mike himself, Kieran McAnallen. I started off by asking Kieran about how he got to know Bertie.
Well, I started rallying away back in the late 70s, and I was doing a number of rallies during the Irish Tarmac Championship and various other events, and I got to know Bertie through meeting him at various rallies.
Okay, yes, right.
We were having a real good run ourselves in the Tarmac Championship, and we I met with Bertie someplace, I don't know where it was anyway, and we were talking about rallying, and I said, "Are you doing Donegal?" And he says, "No, I'm not." He says, "I can't put the budget together."
Okay.
And I talked to him for a while to find out how much more he needed, etc. And when he told me, he says, "Right, count me in, I'll support you on that."
Okay.
And we ended up both cars going to do Donegal, and unfortunately, Bertie went out with seized back axle on the second or third stage.
Right. Yes.
And that's how I got to know. That's how I got to know Bertie and got involved with Bertie.
Yeah, and your name and your company name continued on the cars right through. Then after that.
Yeah, we probably would be one of the, if not the longest, running sponsorship in Ireland. With one driver. The only other one that I can recall was the late Russell Brooks on the receipt for hire.
Yeah, that's right enough. Yeah. And like, did you find that having like Algy Mac and then becoming Tough Mac, did that help like raise the profile of your business at that time as well?
Absolutely. Bertie was in the steel business, structural steel business, and we were in the glass business. And as Bertie often said, if the two things are put together right, they're two very strong substances.
Yes.
And him and I bonded unbelievably as regards business and sponsorship, and on personal basis too. And we used to do comparisons of him and I, of his business and my business, because they were both similar sizes back in the early years, but then he went on to grow into a massive big operation. And it was a very interesting friendship, because the two of us had a lot in common. We both had sport and with business in common.
Yes.
And we could do a lot of comparisons. And he would be in on jobs and be telling me about them, and I'd find out who the architect or who the builder was or whatever.
Yes.
And then we would make contact with them and see how we could get in on the job. And so a lot of times Bertie introduced us to the various people.
All right, yes. So like, it was a one for your business then as well, obviously too. So
well, it was a win-win all the time. And as I say, we were working with someone who had a phenomenal reputation in the industry and in sport.
Yes.
And who was done everything totally above board and very professional.
Yeah, like everybody I spoke to, that's the one thing they said about Bertie. Everything was done 100% and down the line, and there no messing about. And it was everything was just so genuine.
There never was one thing or even a suggestion of one thing of doing things down the line.
Yes.
And Bertie always had a great saying whenever we went out of a rally, and we'd be having a wee bit of an inquest about it, and Bertie would say, "Hold on, boys. If we had all the money in China and 10 new cars, we can't win the championship or we can't win the rally."
Yes.
And, you know, I have used that saying many, many times since, when we're sitting looking at something and trying to figure out how to go forward or what went wrong.
Yeah. So, like, the branding on the cars, like, you know, we think of the BMW, the Legacy, even, you know, and through the Imprezas, and especially like the silver Legacy or the silver Impreza. Like, those cars are still iconic to this day. Like,
that's right.
Like, how, you know, was that like a team effort, them liveries, or how did they come about?
Sometimes there was a discussion, but it was more often or not, it was basically as you know, the cars, most of the cars come from ProDrive.
Okay, yes.
And to be honest with you, ProDrive would have come up with the ideas,
right?
And they would have faxed them across or whatever way the communication was back in those years for us to have a look at.
Yes.
Maybe we'd done a bit of tweaking, and more often than not, we just left them as they were.
And isn't it amazing to, like, you know, they're still, you know, to this day, that, you know, they are still the cars that people think of as they think of that era, and they associate the name Tough Mac with Subaru, with Bertie Fisher. You know, it's just amazing the way it all fell in together.
Well, they all are icon cars from back in that era, and they all are still in existence to this day, and they all are very, 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 very valuable to the people that own them.
Yes.
And they're just impossible to get your hands on them.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah. And then, as you say, like with Bertie, you know, you were his title sponsor, yes, but more than that, you were a good friend, and you also became team manager. Like Bertie done even his rallying approach to rallying was different from everybody else. You know, he had a team around him that let him concentrate on the driving. That all he had to do was jump in and drive. He knew that the service plan was looked after. He knew that everything else was running smoothly. Wasn't that a very important part of Bertie Fisher too?
Well, that's true. He when I started sponsoring him, As I say, I was rallying myself, and because I was building the business up on that, it was easier to give my attentions to Bertie than it was to organise and going to do events myself and that. And at the start, we would have out and done his pace notes for him, or gravel notes for him, I should say. And then as time went on, we got into more of the management side, and along with Sydney and that, and we used to go on the chase cars, and whenever they were allowed back in that era, and be sitting at the end of every stage waiting on them. And you were also sitting listening for the crackling on the radio in case it was in difficulty someplace or it went off or whatever. And it was amazing the way that you fitted into the team type of thing, and was given the responsibility of making decisions for him as you went along, you know.
Yeah, I you know, like even, you know, doing gravel crew and that, like the call you would make on tires would be vital at times, wasn't it? You know, so.
Absolutely vital in time. And the one story I can recall, I don't know what year it was in Donegal, and we had been out doing the weather, and we're checking the Sydney night, and we had it till as long as we possibly could, and it was Nakala.
Yes.
And we were coming back down off Nakala to Kerrykeel, and when we went to Kerrykeel, Sammy Hamill was standing talking to Bertie, and Bertie says, "Well, have you made the decision?" And I said, "Slicks." And it was raining, and Bertie says, "Do you want a driver?" And I says, "Bertie, there's no point in us going out to do a job unless you listen to what we tell you." And Sammy speaks up, he says, "Do I detect there's a conflict between management?" And I said, "Just wait and see, say nothing." And I went up onto the stage, and he sat, it took 23 seconds or something off everybody else on the stage because the tire choice was right.
He made the right call, yeah.
But it was just pure luck. Pure luck, you know.
Educated luck, maybe, you know. So.
Yeah.
So.
But
yeah,
that was one of the good moments. I think he won the rally that year, and that was another bonus to it, you know.
Exactly. And
but there was a lot of disappointments too.
Oh, of course, yeah, but like, isn't that sometimes the joy of rallying, you know? So, you're also then like a big supporter. We have to remember Mark now at this time too. Like, in the year 2000, Mark was using your Grip N Evo at that stage, wasn't he? And select the Irish events.
Mark was Bertie's double in every way, even in the way he talked. Mind you, then you'd be on the phone thinking you're talking to Bertie, and Mark you're talking to.
Yes.
And Mark was unbelievable. Mark, I lent my car to Mark in the year 2000 to do the Tarmac Championship, which him and Gordon Noble won. And one of the great memories of that was over in Isle of Man, and again Sammy Hamill and I think it was Mick Linford from Future Cars, Bertie and myself had flew out to one of the stages, and we were sitting watching, and I think Mark was maybe running third or fourth in the road, and the rest was in front of him. And Mark come down over this crossroads, he never lifted. The rest of them all lifted. Mark never lifted.
Right.
And Bertie turns around and he says to me, he says, "Well, I'll chat to us by." He says, I says, "Why?" He says, "You'll be getting that car back in a bundle of scrap." I says, "Leave the lad alone. He'll be all right." And he went on to win. He was beating the WRC's hands down in Isle of Man, and also I think in Killarney in the car.
He was an exception.
Mark was, there's no knowing where Mark would have been today as regards motorsport.
Yes.
Had that tragedy never happened.
He was destined for the top, wasn't he, really? You know. So.
Absolutely. But the thing about Mark was a very genuine lad in every way, from the point of view that he listened to what he was asked to do.
Right.
And he went out and he done it to the best of his ability. And if it didn't work, he'd come back and say that didn't work. What next will we try?
Right.
And he was always a trier. He was always a way ahead of everybody else in his thinking.
Yes. Well, and then like just I suppose to wrap up now, like when you think back of Bertie Fisher, first of all, yes, the rally driver, but Bertie Fisher, the man. What's your abiding memories of Bertie?
Well, as I said, Bertie and I done several comparisons down through the years on different things, and I looked at this and looked at that, and Bertie was a great man for planning the thing in great detail, and it proved dividends many times over in doing what he done, you know.
Yeah, so I planning was the big thing. And if you want a abiding memory of him, then as the rally man, then as well.
I have one good memory of him where we're over in at the RAC rally, and it was the year that Mark was doing it, and Bertie was doing it, and Bertie was doing it in full drive.
The World Car, yes.
Yeah. And it was more or less a prototype, and it was trial and error. And another good friend of ours, Stephen Finlay, was doing it.
Okay.
And Stephen beat Bertie. And Bertie, after all was over, come to me in the secretary and he says, I need a bit of help here because I'm going to be listening to a lot of slagging from Mr. Finlay. But that was the friendship that goes between all of them at that time. But, you know, rallying was a great sport and still is a great sport. It's just unfortunate that IE is not the same events that there was back in that era.
Yes. I think there was great camaraderie between the drivers, wasn't there?
The camaraderie between rally and the winding up and the second up and the looks of one another.
Yes.
Them's the things I'll never forget, you know. I know you've interviewed Vincent Bonner, and Vincent was one of them legends in every way.
Yes.
And Os McHale, absolutely gentleman.
Yes. Well, Kieran, I really appreciate you taking the time to join us, and thank you very much.
Not a problem, Kevin.
Good man.
Okay.
The band plays for Bertie Fisher and the local man Rory Kennedy. It's all over bar the shouting as Bertie and Rory get a tumultuous reception as the winners of the 21st Shell and Leaded Donegal International Rally.
I've never really had proper competition with this car since I've sort of got used to driving it, because only having done 6 stages on the circuit, it didn't really give me the full feel for the car. So we really used Friday as a place. We didn't want to get too far behind Kenny, but once I got confidence with the car, then we really had an attack yesterday morning, and it worked out very well.
Rory, how was it from the co-driver's seat?
Well,
good weekend.
Very good, first class, I must say, Gary. We, as Bertie explained there, we tried really hard on Saturday, and in particular to get through Fallon. It was a bit of a bogey area for us in the past, but this time we really showed our true form, you know, and I must say it took me all my life to read the notes as quickly as he was driving the car, so, you know, all used to Bertie, like he did a first class job, and like we're more than elated here at the moment.
Next I spoke to Ivan Fuery. Ivan would be well known to many as he was a leading light in the Donegal Motor Club, and he's also written the fantastic book Donegal Experience. Ivan got to know Bertie in the mid-80s, and there's some fascinating tales. I'm sure you'll enjoy it. We started off by asking when he first got to know Bertie.
I would say probably 1984, 85, probably 84 when Jim Callahan took over as clerk of the course. And I was introduced to Austin, and of course that came along with Bertie. Both great gentlemen at the time.
Yeah. And I would say those early years in Donegal, I would say there's a few stories.
There are lots of stories, Kevin. Some of them might not be fit for public consumption, but one of the funny ones I would think, Jim Callahan was COC back in 84, 85, as I said. And one of the rules at the time was competitors traversing the stage in the opposite direction. So there was a one-way system going. And Jim decided he'd go out and take a run around and observe the stages. And we had just got into Cairn Hill, gone up around the first corner, and we saw a certain competitor bombing down the road, going the wrong way. Jim threw the car across the road and blocked him, and got out to chastise the offender. Came back to the car fuming, and what's wrong? He said, cheeky bugger and all that sort of stuff. And I got out and I said, hold on a minute now. I got out and identified myself and started to take down particulars. The driver was getting angrier and angrier. And the navigator trying to calm him down. Will you shut up, he said. You know, he's a guard. But that didn't work either. I made him turn the car and go the right way. And I got back in with Jim, and we sat there for a while just to watch things. You know, there was a bit of giggling going on, as Callum would say, you know, that put manners on that book, you know. And later that evening, I met Bertie in the hotel, and I'm probably having a bite or a drink or something. And he said, I heard you put manners on one of the lads out there. You're one tight kid. And a big laugh. And, you know, Fuery, you would want to get a speed gun. I tried to get one from a colleague, but it was no go. So, you know, believe it or not, Kevin, I made one up. It was a big black torch with a saucer on front and black tape. And we used it a few times. Went out, and Knockalla was the biggest problem because of the speed of Knockalla.
Yes.
And all the boys, you'd hold it out and you'd look down at it, and you'd put it in the back seat of the car, and you'd wave them on or you'd stop them. But only one fella challenged me, and I demanded his road book and wrote the infringement in it. And carry on now, and that's enough. If I catch you again, you're out of the rally, and that's the clerk of the course over there.
Yes.
But of course, Bertie again, the word got out, and he came up to me and he looked it in front of me straight, and he said, "You put that thing on me, there will be consequences." And a big grin. Now, whether he knew anything or not, but I would say at the time it probably had a good effect, and nearly everyone slowed down because of that yoke out there with the gun, you know.
Yes.
But I've been called worse things. 2 years, I think Bertie found out through James Cullen or Rory or somebody, and he discovered what it was all about, and he said, "You gave me great stick about it, you know, but there was nothing you could do. We had to do something."
Yes.
I think it had a desired effect, Kevin, you know.
So, like, we all know, like, Irish rallying was in a very bad place in '86, and the Donegal Motor Club, you know, I suppose jumped in there and says they were going to organise and they were going to run the rally. Bertie and Austin took a very proactive role in that.
Yeah, as I say, you know, there was a lot going on at the time between speeding and pace notes and accidents. And I'd say the people in Dawson Street were getting very concerned about it. Matt decided to take on the rally. He was elected clerk of the course. He took it on, and one of the important things he did was he made contact with Bertie and Austin, and asked them would they take on the role of safety officer. And of course, Bertie had already had a major situation that developed in Galway when the brakes failed, and of course Bertie decided, I'm going to take a back seat for a while, you know. And pace notes were in, you see, but the crowds and the speed was getting up, and we had to do something about it. And that's, I think, where the crack started, with Matt standing out in the middle of the road shouting at spectators, "Do you want a rally?" And it became a sort of a catchphrase there for a while.
Yes.
As only Matt could, you know.
And like Bertie and Austin had the final word. Like if they weren't happy with the stage, it didn't run. And if they were
well, I mean, the law was laid down, and they were told if Bertie decides to stop and sees the crowds are out of control or anything is not in the right place, if he says stop, that's it, stop. The rally stops. And the full authority of the clerk of the course at the time.
Yeah. So then, like, obviously there was a strong friendship built in there between Bertie, the club, and yourself. Yes,
well, I suppose a lot of it came through Austin, because we were very friendly with Austin.
Okay.
And Austin would often always advise me, you know, ring me or ring Bertie, or, you know, we'll have a chat about a problem. And the good thing about it was, you know, Bertie and Austin had more or less the same attitude as Jim Kennedy, God bless him. There are no problems, only solutions. And it became a bit of a mantra at the time. You went to Jim Kennedy or Bertie with a problem, you know, it was sorted there and then, you know. Well, the insurance crisis hit in the South, and rallies were basically, you know, told that's it. And I was at a meeting, and I came home from the meeting, and I said, you know, this is doom and gloom. What are we going to do? And I rang Austin to talk to him first, but I wasn't getting Austin, him working in the hospital at the time. And then I got on to Bertie, and he suggested we convene a small meeting. Now, Billy Campbell was the Tudor programs man, and he came down from Belfast, and we met in the hotel. I think Alan Verso came up from Cork. Danny Caddy was there, myself, I think Matt came along later. And see if there was anything we could do. And of course, Bertie came to the fore and said, look, if there's anything that can be done, don't hesitate me. I'm only a phone call away. And he advised, and out of that meeting or two after, we had the Tarmac Rally Supporters Club. You see, Bertie had plenty of contacts, and he used them well. There was a massive auction set up the north someplace. I can't remember where now exactly, Kevin. And all the memorabilia started coming in. Ari Vatten and stuff came in, and various other competitors. You name it, it was donated to the fund.
Okay, yes. And
before long, as it, you know, the whole situation had taken legs, and there was events being run all over the country. If you rang Bertie and said, you know, there's something on in Navan or someplace down in Galway, he would head off and he would give it the support, and he would call in the likes of McHale and Billy, and, you know, people that would be the support. Wherever you wanted Bertie, he would turn up. Fair play to him. Now, work committee, all right, you know.
Yes.
It ended up, I think we ended up with, we got buckets out of, what was the sweet company there in town, Oldfield. Yeah, and there was a guy there, and we knew him, and he was into rally, and he gave us a load of white buckets, and Billy Campbell did all the stickers and made up the boards.
So, like, listening to that, like, Bertie was becoming more than just, you know, your normal rally driver. He was becoming a bit of an ambassador for the sport as well, wasn't he?
He was. Bertie was great. He was a great man, as I said already, a great man to go to for advice. And I was COC in 1995, I think it was. I was at a meeting in Dublin, Troa meeting, the Tarmac organisation, and the chairman position arose, and numerous names were put forward. Somebody from Galway would put forward their name, someone from Killarney put forward a name. And it was going around the table, and we were getting nowhere. And there was a comment, I think myself mentioned, we should get somebody without baggage who doesn't have a club to fall back on or need to push.
Right.
And I was asked the question, well, I proposed Austin Frazer, and I was asked, did Austin say yes? And I had to answer it in the sort of situation. Well, he hasn't said no. But it was one of those smart ones that came back to bite me. The next day I rang Bertie from work and explained my problem and how I got my big feet in at this time. But he said, well, leave her with me, Fuery, and I'll talk to Austin, we'll take him out for lunch and see what happens. Thankfully, he agreed. And thankfully, Austin spent 5 very productive years in the role and brought in a lot of innovations and picked us up a lot, you know, shook us a little bit and got things going the right way, you know.
Yeah.
So it was good in that sense, you know.
Yeah. I think we should pay tribute to Austin. Like Austin Frazer, like, you know, what he done for Donegal Motor Club, what he done for the Tarmac, you know, association there, you to say, like, this man was setting standards.
Oh, he was. I mean, well, I don't think, not being flippant about it, there mightn't have been a Donegal without Austin. Took the reins and said, listen, let's do something, you know.
Yeah.
And fair play to him, you know.
And like, you know, you were saying Bertie always, everything they approached was very professional, wasn't it?
Very, very, very professional in everything he did, and he expected the same from organisers and people he worked with. There was on one occasion, I think it was, he was competing in the Mobil 1 car, And at the prize given on the Sunday night, when he was receiving his award, you know, say a few words. Charlie Collins would ask him to say a few words. He spoke highly of the value of sponsorship, and he praised Shell for their involvement and their support and backing for the club. And it sort of went very well with a lot of people that he was looking upon this is my club and I need a bit of backing on it, you know.
Yeah. And you know, as you say, he was sponsored by a rival oil company, but he still had the wherewithal to say that, you know, this is good for the sport, this is good for us. You know, I'll give these guys a praise, and it was a lovely thing to do, wasn't it?
Yeah, and I would safely say it didn't do him any harm where Shell are concerned.
That's for sure.
I think they rolled back in with him after that because, you know, they considered it a very nice move and a very gentlemanly move, you know.
Yeah. And a great motivator to get things done as well, wasn't it?
Oh yes.
The Summit Rally in the year 2000.
Oh yeah, that was the peak for Bertie. I mean, things had fallen apart. A number of clubs had fallen out of the Tarmac Championship. There was nothing happening up the north, and Bertie decided, you know, having talked to a few people in a skill and motor club and all there is, they decided to put this event together. And it was good. I was brought in at an early stage, and he picked a team, and we got working on it, and it turned out to be a massive event. Very enjoyable and very worthwhile. And it was a great thing that he would set his mind to something and nothing would hold him back.
Yeah.
Just to go out and get the quarry off Sean Quinn and do what he had to do was unbelievable, you know.
And a huge amount of money raised for charity that weekend as well, wasn't there too? So
yes, that's right. Yeah, a big function in the what was it? The Sleeve Russell, I think.
The Sleeve Russell, that's right. And yes, there was the businessman and all, but there was a lot of fun in Bertie as well too, wasn't there?
No, well, he was always up to something. And I mean, if not winding me up, he was winding Kieran McAnallen up, or he'd be onto Rory, and there would be always stories. There was always a party after the prize given, the Blue Room or whatever people used to name it. There was 3 rooms at the back of the hotel and when the prize giving was over, hung around for a while, everybody went home, and then we all migrated into the back room and enjoyed ourselves for an hour or two or whatever went on.
Yes.
And there was one occasion, I think it was 96, the 25th International. We retired there for a while, and Mary Moriarty brought in a big birthday cake, and Cynthia had already ordered another one. So there was 2 big cakes being wheeled in, and Mary arrived in with the knives and started cutting and plates and all the rest. And it was Mr. Fisher. Hand that out, Mr. Fisher. And of course they were looking, you know, but Mary was just a friend to everybody, and she took everybody on board. So I got McHale and Fisher and the whole lot of them handing out cake. And then she came on with pint glasses and a silent collection, notes only. You hear me? And I mean, nobody was saying no to Bertie, because if he did, you know. But I mean, if they ignored him, it was at their peril, I'll tell you. You know?
That's for sure. Yeah. And you kind of got your own back on him. You commissioned Jim Barber to do a cartoon celebrating, wasn't it, 25 years at Donegal at that time?
Yeah, I don't know where. I met Jim Bamber somewhere now, be the Isle of Man or someplace, and I bought one of his books. The time of the famous BMW when it got stuck on the ramp or on the jack and they couldn't get it down, and he drew up a cartoon of everybody lifting, but he quoted Bertie underneath. And now I'm not saying Bertie used a bad language, but Jim Bamber used a bad language. When I say expletive the car, lift the expletive car, and it was just it would come in then. It would get them photocopied in the rally office and stick them up on their notice board, and of course it was uproar. Where can I get a copy of that? But it didn't matter. I mean, Bertie appeared in the 2000 poster. He was in a number. He was in a number of cartoons, but I put him in the poster a few times in 2000. And remember him come to me on Sunday evening. He said, "I want to have a dozen of them posters." I said, "Go out to Ronnie and get them." And he went out and went away with a half a dozen of the posters. But a bit like Plum Tyndall, Plum got some too, and got them mounted and handed them out for Christmas. I think Bertie was off the same frame of mind, you know.
Yes,
It was good. It was good, clean fun, you know.
Yes. And the 2000 Tarmac Championship Award night, kind of the stuff of legend, isn't it?
Oh, well, that took on a life of its own. I mean, it was a great night and there was great enjoyment. Everybody enjoyed the time. And as I usually say, the after party was bigger than the one before. And naturally enough, we all huddled and there was 2 or 3 tables pulled together. The crack would start and the bragging would start. And who was the fastest over this stage and that stage. And I don't know who came up with the idea, but all of a sudden, the floor was cleared and Gladys Fisher would sit on one chair and Bertie would push her. And then they had a race down the middle of the hall between Gladys and Bernie, McHale and Linda Nesbitt. I don't know who else was involved. But then this was great applause and great enjoyment. And, you know, are they mad or something? But it didn't matter.
Yes.
The enjoyment was there and the bit of crack. And I think there was they called it a draw.
Okay.
The agreement was, well, we'll meet here back in February for the annual dinner dance and we'll have a rematch. So that was all.
And unfortunately, we never got the chance to hear the rematch.
Yeah. Sorry if I'm cutting across you, Kevin.
No, you're fine.
Needless to say, the rematch didn't take place, and what followed was a terrible tragedy. And I remember being asked, Austin, at the time, would you come up and help us in the organizations and do this and do that? And people had to be contacted and manpower had to be brought in, and you knew where to go for. But myself and Rory used to travel to meetings, and, you know, there was very little said in the car at the time.
Yes.
The meetings were in Ballinamallow. You know, we were all shocked and saddened. And as it transpires, I was very honoured and privileged to be one of the bearers at Bertie's funeral. They had a situation where so many people wanted to be involved with the three, between Mark's friends, Emma's friends, and Bertie's friends. And it was a sort of, you'll carry from here to a certain point, and then you'll drop out. And somebody else will drop in and carry it another way. And it was that sort of organization that had to be done. But you know, there were no words to describe. When we came back, then we started talking to people. Oh, we'd love to have been there, and we did this and we did that. And we talked to Rory, and he said, "What do you think?" And we got it organized that we could have a memorial service in the Martyrs Church in Letterkenny. Up Kiltoy, and the number of people, we were flabbergasted, the number of people. They were bulging out the doors and they were outside and everything. And from there on, we had another one the following year, and we decided to include other deceased members of the club. And it started to roll on. And to the best of my knowledge, it's still nearly an annual event. And they came down, Marshall's families came down from the north. It was a very emotional evening. And there were always a few people read out at the time. You know, the chairman would go up and mention certain people who had died over the year and brought them into the book of remembrance, you know.
Yes. But a joyful occasion too, you know. It's nice to get people together in case they got to remember. And you know that, you know, now as people go outside, there'll be stories told. And
there was always, the ladies would always organise tea and coffee and biscuits, and they'd make up sandwiches, and we'd go into the back room. And as you say, the stories would be legend at that stage. You know, some of the stories I've gathered a lot of moss over the years, but you know, we just keep going with them. You know, we add a little bit every year. You know?
That is sure, no harm in that. So, like, to wrap up, then, I suppose, like, this is the question I've asked everybody I've spoke to so far. Like, Bertie Fisher, the rally driver, and Bertie Fisher, the man. What's your abiding memories?
I always thought Bertie is the perfect gentleman. He had no airs or graces. He was always very open and approachable and spoke to everybody. And on one occasion, now this is before I ever got involved, in the Isle of Man, and waiting for Bertie to come into this water splash, nothing happened, waited, decided, no, to hell with it. We'll go to the next stage. And we were heading back to the car and met Bertie and the guys coming up the road. And naturally, you know, what happened, Bertie? And Bertie's response was, hit a bank, and kept walking.
Yes.
And Kieran McAnallen, they were all had long faces. Bertie had crashed out of the rally, you see. And we just kept going. But he was that sort of person. He had a word for everybody. He would never ignore you.
Yes.
And it didn't matter who you were or what you were. I mean, my daughter Laura just idolized him. And for rally, as for the rally driver, I always saw Bertie as very professional, as I said already, you know, very competitive. He worked hard, he played hard. And if the one thing I noticed about him, he was very supportive of the other competitors. If he could do a young fella a favor, he wouldn't pass him. And I'm sure boys and guys were out there more or less did the same for him if they could.
Yes.
But he had a very good team with him and very good organization. And you know, your man's in trouble there, go over and help him. You know, that sort of thing. So the admiration went from that way. You know.
Yeah, I think, you know, it was always looking out for other people, even in the heat of battle. And he was having maybe a bad day himself, he was always still prepared to go the extra mile for others.
Yeah, he was involved. He got deeply involved with the Competitors Association, and he got them organised and gave them a voice. And as I say, he was very instrumental in the tarmac supporters. And you know, as I say, you know, himself and Austin were a great team.
Yes.
And if one didn't have an answer, the other did. But I mean, put it all down to experience, you know.
Yes, they've been around long enough to know the pros and cons.
Yeah, definitely.
So, even I think that there is a nicer place to wrap it up. Is there anything? Because we've, you know, that's lovely memories there, Bertie.
Yeah, well, I'm very pleased and very honoured to be able to contribute in some small way, because it was a big loss to everybody, but it was a big loss to the club, to ourselves, myself as a very good friend.
Gordon Noble joined us now to speak about his recollections of sitting along with Mark Fisher. It's a lovely story. I started off by asking Gordon how he become involved with Fishers.
We had indeed, Kevin. I mean, Mark and I's partnership started way back in the early 90s, I suppose. I was doing gravel notes for Bertie and Rory, and my connection obviously was through Rory at the time. And any time I wasn't competing on a round of the Tarmac Championship, seemed to get invited along to come and do gravel notes for them. And obviously Mark was about the team, and we got to know each other slowly, I suppose. But in 1998, then Mark had spent a few years in his Suzuki and in his Nissan Micra, and got an opportunity to go and do the SEAT Super 6 Challenge, 6 drivers and six cars across six events. And I got invited along there as the person that was going to co-drive for him. And there was a whole lot of theories behind that, Bertie, this theory that I would be older and wiser and able to manage him better, but I don't know that really happened. When he got to know Mark, he became his own man and things like that. But yeah, we built up a very, very strong personal relationship as well as our other rallying relationship, you know. So I don't know, I don't mind saying it, but whenever the unfortunate accident happened 20 years ago, he was my best friend at the time. He was the guy that I rang every day to talk about the gossip and scandal rather than just talk about rallying and things. So had a significant impact on my life, both personally and in rallying terms. So.
Yeah. And you know, Bertie and Mark had a very close relationship, you know, father-son relationship. I think they seem to have that very similar kind of method. You know, everything was worked out to the last. That will, you know, nothing was left to chance, really, was it?
You're exactly right. Both of them are very intelligent guys, but very methodical in the way they went about things. They always thought every process through, should it be talking about work, talking engineering, or talking about kind of rallying. And they always analysed the whole process to see how they could make it better, make it slicker was a term that Bertie used. But always trying to find an angle, and that was Mark's term, trying to find an angle on things. You know, some little chink that was within the sort of rules, and were never in any way. They always lived their life and their motorsport very much upfront and obeying everything that should have done. But if there's any advantage to be had or to be gained somewhere, they always went and looked for it. And when they found that little advantage and took it on, inevitably others heard of it then, and then they had to repeat that to kind of keep up. But you're right, Mark and Bertie were very similar in that regime. They're both very methodical and intelligent, and worked their way through and found solutions to any sort of a problem. Was always some sort of a solution to it. So
yeah, because I know, speaking with Alistair, he says there's still processes that they're doing in Fisher Engineering now that were implemented then. So, like, you know, how far ahead they were of their time, that they were setting the standard, you know, 20, 25 years ago. Like, so That just says it
Yeah,
all.
and some of them are very small changes. You know, they're very small changes, but some of them very significant changes. I mean, there's one significant change about the factory. It happened in the years I was rallying with Mark, was when they bought a bit of land, they diverted the river and changed the whole factory process into one big long straight line to make it much more efficient, and they could take larger pieces of sort of steel and things like that. That was a big step at the time, which meant it kind of future-proofed the whole factory then, that they were able to take on bigger work and stuff like that. But it's no easy job, you know, decide to take a river and move it about and stuff. So, and then, you know, there are also the other small chinks where they were looking at different jointing systems and different ways of welding and different ways of bolting stuff, that they could prefabricate more stuff back in the actual factory where it was warm, and the tolerances were much tighter than taking it out the actual site in the cold and the wind, and being many meters above sort of ground whenever you can't do things at such a fine tolerance or build them or make them. So there was lots of things in their processes and ways of working that were and innovative, if not nothing else, you know.
Yes. And like Mark was obviously destined for greater things on the rally stage, and Bertie was almost taking a step back to allow Mark to do that. That was such a big opportunity for Mark there, wasn't there?
Yeah, but I'm not sure how conscious Bertie was, but he was actually personally taking a step back. But I know that he often did that, where he didn't necessarily compete on a rally if he wanted to be there to kind of support Mark as well. And it was a genuine move that he saw Mark's ability and his potential as well, that he was trying to encourage him to do that. I mean, Bertie, you know, if you take it back to the other way around, Bertie was the one that encouraged Mark initially to go to university and follow his ordinary engineering career path, but never had passed that then, and proven his ability and proven how well he could work in the factory. He then was extremely supportive of the potential rallying move forward, and things like, you know, getting a Group N car in 99 and 2000 to move up to that sort of level and take the step forward as he was going. So and not just, you know, hiring a car from him, there's a lot more behind the scene and trying to, you know, be clever about how you do things and teach him about how to, not necessarily how to drive. Mark didn't need to be taught that. He always came very sort of naturally to him, but anything else he could teach him about car setup or working with a team and stuff like that, that was very much encouraged and supported. And I'm 100% sure Bertie saw that there was an enormous potential and what Mark was going to move on to and move up to, you know.
Absolutely. And like, you know, the Fisher family, like, they were steeped in rally, and like we often think of like RPM, like the breakfast halt in Ballinamallard, Bertie's mother and father at the ramp and all. It was such a huge part of everything though.
Oh, very much so. I mean, there's some very iconic pictures of the dad's mum and dad, both Tommy and Elsie, at the finish of the circuit in the first year they won, and Bertie sharing the champagne with his dad and his mum being there as well. And you say then how much they embroiled the factory in as well, where the Ulster Rally used to come and service there, and the whole family, Gladys and Emma and everybody out in the mornings cooking big breakfast, like it was like having a barbecue at 7 a.m. or something like that. But the whole family very much, you know, and Bertie's brothers as well, Ernie and Ivan, and so, and Kenny very much got involved in the motorsport world. So yes, so very much a whole group of them together. And you know, there was other times that whenever there was a motorhome to be used to go to Killarney or the Circuit of Ireland or whatever those rallies, it was Gladys was there and Emma was there as well, you know, along with Carol Meek, I remember quite well being on a few of those trips trying to feed everybody. A lot of hungry guys chasing about and stuff, but very much the whole family got involved in it, you know. So
and like, you know, we have to remember Emma too. Like, Emma was doing such wonderful work for charity and all too, and the church as well. It was, you know, she was destined for great things too, wasn't she? You know, so.
I think she was. I wouldn't have known Emma as well, but or Roy either, but I knew of them and they were about quite a bit. But as you say, Emma was doing a lot of sterling work for her charities, traveling abroad and doing great work, and passing on her own Christian message, as well as doing, you know, very successful work, and that was something that was growing and it was blossoming at that time in her life, and I'm sure she would have carried it on and done quite a lot more, you know. So.
Yeah, because like, we even think now even to this day, the Fisher Foundation, you know, the seeds were sown then and continue you know, they're still providing much needed funds for charities and even the motorsport to this day, you know. So.
Exactly right. That was a very important thing that was done post the accident and post the, you know, unfortunate death was that Fisher Foundation was set up. And as you say, it supports very many things. A lot of those Christian charities that Emma was involved in, motorsport charities, especially the sort of safety regimes. And I think it's very important as well that the money is not just thrown away lightly. There's a proper bidding system, and people have to justify what they're doing with it. And it's very much for buying something that's useful rather than only for temporary uses as well. So there's a longer term use of it, and that is continuing on, thankfully. So fantastic legacy and good way trying to keep the name alive, very, very much, you know.
And then, you know, going up now, I suppose, to the present day, yourself and Alistair, you know, the Fisher and Noble partnership continues. Like, that must be a special thing for you there too.
It's fantastic to go back and make that link again. You know, Alistair is his own man. Don't be thinking that he's anything else. But it's just the whole the history and the heritage behind it. I think it's good to renew that and make that move forward. You know, I mean, Mark and Alistair's character or personality is different in quite a number of ways, but it doesn't take away from any of the two of them's ability to drive and how they make it. Mark was much more of a there was an element of sort of devilment was the term we would have used at the time. I'm not sure if anybody knows exactly what that is, but there's an element of badness without any sort of malice, which also always created an element of fun and an element of very positive feeling about everything, you know. And he was good at that. He was a very good people person. He was very good at making people work for him and actually support him without being forceful in any way. He was a sort of a guy that was magnetic almost. People wanted to be there and wanted to actually support him. So
you wanted to do something for us.
Exactly right. Yeah, you wanted to be there and be supportive, and he had a good way of encouraging people to work with him. And he was also very respectful and then thankful whenever people did do that for him. So, I mean, as you say, it's very good to be able to square the whole circle at whatever time you want to use and come back now with Alistair and have a success again. So it's good to do that. Yeah.
Now, I suppose to start wrapping things up, I've asked everybody this question so far. Your standout memories of Bertie Fisher and I suppose Mark, the rally people, and the person behind the helmet, I suppose.
Well, it's difficult, I suppose. It's like so many things in life. There's so many vivid, positive memories you have about the two guys and how they worked together and so on. But one of the ones that I have a photograph hanging up on the wall behind me here, and I keep referring back to and looking at with joy, is at the finish ramp of the Donegal Rally 1999, I believe it was, whenever Mark and I were in a Group N Subaru. We were lucky enough to win Group N. We were very good. We led from the first day, even though Bertie had given us a warning not to be going fast. We need to learn this car and so on. So we led from day one. We had a great experience. We learned the car. It was dry. It was wet on a Saturday. We did everything right and some very, very good times. Unfortunately, Bertie and Rory slid off another. Kindrum or Fanad, I can't quite remember which the two, but they had dropped well down the order. But when we got to the finish ramp, it was Bertie was very keen to wait. He was in the top 2 or 3. We were 6th or 7th. He was very keen to wait until we came over the ramp and get a picture of the whole of us together. So back to that, what we said earlier on about very much the family atmosphere, and he was there to try and support Mark and give him that encouragement for the sort of future. So that's one moment, I suppose, in the whole time that we. We had together
the rally man and the man that
the whole lot that together, you know, it was something positive out of that. But there's lots of other times when we're doing good things and doing kind of bad both. But they were all fun. They were all positive, and that's the.
There was no malice or no badness.
No malice, no badness. There's always something good about it. So fantastic times, I must say, Kim.
That's some lovely memories there. So Gordon, thanks for taking the time for joining us here.
Thank you very much, Kevin. It's good to be here. Good to be part of this, I must say. Thanks again.
That was Nigel Frazer, Kieran McAnallen, Ivan Fuery, and Gordon Noble, and myself, Kevin McAnallen, talking rally. That's part 2 of our tribute to Bertie Fisher. And in the next episode, I'll be speaking to Dave Campion from ProDrive, Alistair Fisher, and Rory Kennedy. If you enjoyed the podcast, can you please like and share it across all social media? And if you're listening to that podcast, if you can rate the podcast, it would be gratefully appreciated. Until the next time, take care, stay safe. Bye.